All right, I get it. Let's get back to talking about yachting specifically. Here's my question. Which do you prefer, monohull or catamaran? Because I know you're currently on a catamaran in a marina in Miami. Yes, there are two main types of sailing vessels, monohulls and multi-hulls. A monohull is your typical yacht, while a multi-hull is a catamaran or trimaran. Well, I'm a passionate advocate for multi-hulls, specifically catamarans. After sailing on monohulls for 10 years, I had enough of it and never even tried a catamaran, right? Is that how I understand it correctly? What's that? Come again? I never sailed on a catamaran at all. So it was 10 years only on monohulls, right? I only sailed on monohulls, various ones. And I didn't even have the thought of a catamaran in my mind. That's pretty much how it was. And I didn't switch to a monohull for one simple reason. There were certain aspects that were, well, uncomfortable for me. It's a constant roll on voyages. It's pitching. It's a small boat area because a fairly large space only starts somewhere around 55 feet. Well, for me, everyone has their own space requirements. And honestly, these factors didn't allow me to move and live on board. In 2016, my friend, who owns a Bavaria 44, crossed the ocean with friends on a Leopard 48. And he returned from the voyage in December of that year. We sat down in a cafe and he told me about it. Max Nirvana, he's sort of my godfather who pushed me towards catamarans. He just talked about it for 2 hours, and I fell in love with this type of boat in my mind. And from his story, I realized that this sailboat, this type of sailboat, has all the advantages that are important to me and none of the disadvantages that were holding me back. So in December, I sat down at the computer to find a catamaran for myself, to choose one. I quit my computer job in February after 3 months, yes. And which countries are you talking about? I looked at countries all around the world. So in February, I made the decision to buy a catamaran. And after 9 months, the catamaran was purchased. Since 2017, I've been living on board now, with rare exceptions when I go back to my wonderful and beautiful home in Chisinau. In general, I spend most of my time on board, and now this is the third catamaran I've owned. The first was a Privilege 495, the second was a Katana 40, and now it's also a Privilege 39. Super. Listen, Choki, besides comfort, what else do you think is better, and why should one choose a catamaran from your point of view? I mean, not comfort, but everything else. The fact that there's no long keel means you can get closer to the shore. Am I understanding this correctly? Docking fees, for example, are 1.5 times more expensive in a marina. So there are pros and cons to consider with the marina costs. Let me put it this way. I'll tell you the disadvantages of a catamaran compared to a monohull, because everything else will be advantages, and there are many of them. The video is called Yacht versus Catamarans, which is better. You can watch it where I break down all the points in detail. But here are the main points. Monohulls are better than catamarans in several aspects. The first and most important point is that monohulls can handle, well, pretty much any wave or stormy sea. They're not afraid of capsizing. In fact, the boat can do a full 360 degrees roll if hit by a wave and return to its normal position. I have friends who've experienced this thrilling situation. This feature is definitely an advantage. The second advantage is that monohulls are significantly cheaper than catamarans. This includes the purchase price, maintenance, and docking fees. We'll focus on these 2 points because in all other aspects, catamarans are better. Catamarans are undoubtedly safer. If we consider, let's say, the top 20 main risks on a boat, so the catamaran will definitely be safer. Well, let's start with the fact that a catamaran basically doesn't sink. That is, even if you make 2 holes of about a square meter each in both floats, it still won't sink. It might submerge and have almost zero buoyancy, but we can still hold on to it. We can retrieve some supplies from there. We can get water, and it won't sink because it doesn't have a large, heavy keel and it has a lot of air pockets. And that's why they float. There's an amazing video on the internet where a Privilege 495, just like my first boat, is shown. It's floating with 2 huge holes in the bottom. And a reporter comes, looks at it, and shows it. You can find this video online. Catamarans are much safer. They're more comfortable not only for daily life at anchor somewhere, but also more comfortable during the actual passage. The speed is slightly higher by about 1 knot on average. Of course, it depends on the specific monohull and catamaran, but on average, a monohull will be about 1 knot faster than a catamaran. Here's what else I wanted to say about catamarans. They are very maneuverable vessels. Extremely maneuverable. A properly designed catamaran is controlled by 2 motors. Having 2 engines is a huge advantage because it's very common for something to happen and 1 engine to stall. I've had cases like this. For example, a student wrapped a rope around one of the motors right at the entrance to the bay in Fort Lauderdale. If I didn't have a second engine, I would have been in trouble. There was a strong side wind and we were positioned right between 2 stone piers. This meant I would have had to drop anchor right on the forewater and sit there to untangle the rope. In general, it would have been a lot of trouble. And I've got a second engine. I started it up, turned it on, set off, dropped anchor, and solved all my problems. Overall, for me, catamarans are just incomparably better than monohulls. But again, it's because this is an emotional purchase, not a rational one. Better or worse, it's very subjective here, extremely so. It's just like someone saying, a Jeep is better than a motorcycle. Well, yeah, it's better, but I'll still ride a motorcycle. I did a solo round-the-world trip on a motorcycle, and I can say it was an unforgettable experience. And it doesn't compare at all in terms of pleasure, impressions, and extreme situations to traveling on 4 wheels. It's exactly the same story with monohull. So for me, Better means my heart simply leans in that direction. Tell me, please, where should I look for a cheap boat? I mean, uh, what's your opinion on this? Well, they say there are very high quality boats in Scandinavia, including Norway, because they take really good care of them there. So, and the prices there are quite reasonable. Do you have any preferences or knowledge about this? I know you recently bought a catamaran. Well, not the most recent one, but the last one you bought was in St. Thomas in the U.S. Virgin Islands, and you registered it there too, right? Is that correct? No, that's not correct. I bought it in the British Virgin Islands on Tortola and registered it in St. Martin. All right, let me tell you what I know about this. Well, first of all, my knowledge is very limited and only relates to catamarans. That's the first thing. So I won't say anything about the Scandinavian market for a simple reason. There are no catamarans there. Well, I mean, there are very, very few. I've heard about this Scandinavian market, but they mostly buy small boats around 30, 32 feet. And yes, they're cheap and well maintained there. But there aren't many large boats there, and they're quite expensive. But where can you buy boats, generally speaking? I'll share my experience, and the first segment where you can find the cheapest boats is Facebook groups. Where boats are listed by the owners themselves. This means we're already getting the boat 10% cheaper without broker fees. So if someone wants to buy a boat, they need to join these groups. They're separate. There are groups for monohulls, groups for catamarans, and there are mixed groups where you can look for your boat. This is the cheapest option. Well, there are other cheap ways too, like local sites such as Craigslist, yeah, and something like OfferUp or whatever it's called. But these are somewhat special cases. And if we're talking about such a large scale approach, if you're looking to buy a catamaran specifically, I can tell you straight up that there are about 15 groups on Facebook. You register there, and you'll constantly get news and amazing boats popping up. Now, for a bit of advertising, there's an incredible boat for sale right now. I highly recommend it. So if anyone watching is interested in buying an amazing uh, catamaran, amazing in terms of the model, not necessarily the condition. I can tell you right now, there's a Privilege 48 for sale in the Philippines. It's just a super boat. I'm dreaming about it. The 48 is going for 130,000. If my memory serves me right, it's something like a 92 or 94 model. Of course, you need to check its condition, but the cheapest 48 I've ever come across was listed at 175. And they wouldn't let it go for 150. I'm just giving you this information so you understand what we're talking about. So, well, including assessments, of course. Yeah, so if you need more details, please get in touch with me. I can give you more precise information about this listing. You can contact them, negotiate, fly out, take a look, and so on. Yes, there you go. So you can buy a boat through these groups. You can buy more expensive boats on websites. And the best site with the widest selection is Yacht World. I bought 2 out of my 3 boats on Yacht World. It'll be 10% more expensive, but it's still a great way to get a really good boat. Okay, So please tell me about finding boats through groups and websites. That's it. I understand. Hey, have you heard about boat sharing? It's called dive sharing, where you don't buy the whole boat, but just a part. Like 4 people buy it together and each uses it for a quarter of the year. Have you heard anything like that? I've heard about it, and as a psychotherapist, I can tell you it's a fantastic way to ruin relationships. It's a surefire way to mess up relationships between the participants. No matter how friendly you were before buying a boat together, co-ownership is a huge problem. Because people have different financial situations, different views, and different thinking styles. Rational versus emotional. And all of this will constantly be in conflict. Should we buy a sail or not? Should we fix it or not? We fixed it, but I said we needed to, and then it broke again. That's it. This is the most reliable way to ruin a relationship with someone. Buy a boat together and you can kiss your friendship goodbye forever. Yep. Tell me, please. You're anchored in the roadstead at Grove, right? So, I have a question about electricity. Actually, 2 questions and one about water. What can you tell me about that? Well, I have my own electricity. I've got 1.5 kilowatts of solar panels, so I don't need any external power. It completely covers all my needs. Yes, I'm anchored here, not in a marina, just at anchor. I'm staying here for free. It's a fantastic spot for anchoring, protected from winds and hurricanes. And I don't need any electricity from shore. I don't need technical water either. My roof is 14 square meters. I collect rainwater from it, basically as much as I want. Just as much as I need. And if it rains less often, I use 300-liter soft tanks, which cost about $55 each these days. I drink a ton of this water during thunderstorms, for example, right on the deck. This is if, let's say, I'm planning something like now. I've been repairing the engine for a month and a half. So we're all done with the engines, right? No, just the second engine. I haven't refueled for a month and a half. And I have water, thankfully. So it's no problem. They say, okay, I agree. What should I do? Should I buy a yacht in Turkey? How would I go from Turkey to the Atlantic or the Mediterranean or maybe Tunisia or Europe, get a Schengen visa or try to get an American tourist visa? What do you think about this? For people who are from Russia? Well, I think the following. Buy a boat and the problems will gradually sort themselves out. That's it in one phrase. So there are no insurmountable problems for changing them. Period. I can elaborate on this topic, but if I do, then it's like this. Every country you plan to visit has its own entry rules. From visa regulations to procedural matters. How much, where, how, when to call, how to call, where to notify, who to contact, where. Well, for example, yes. May I ask a question? Entering American waters without a U.S. visa, what can they do to you? They can confiscate your yacht and put you in jail. Let's say you accidentally went off course and, I don't know, an American Border Patrol boat stopped you in American waters. That's what they can do, because I know that with other countries, they usually just say, all right, get out of our bay and goodbye. Can you tell us more about the situation in America? I'm not really an expert in United States immigration law. That needs to be clearly understood. But over these years spent on board, naturally, I've learned a lot and gained knowledge, some from my own experience and some from the experiences of friends and colleagues. And regarding the United States, I can say that they have a very strict approach to border crossings. In general, their philosophy is as follows: the whole world is a nightmare, and there's only one place worth living. That place is the United States. This philosophy implies that they perfectly understand that the entire world simply dreams of coming to the United States, and to them this isn't a crime. Now here's an interesting point. How do they perceive it if you cross the border illegally? They see it as you found yourself in a dire situation and were compelled to seek out this island of freedom and prosperity, and you've just happened to cross this boundary. So while in many countries, illegally crossing a border is a crime that lands you in prison, things are a bit different with the United States. That's the first thing. But if I understand you correctly, you're talking about something else. What if I'm, let's say, traveling from Cuba to the Bahamas? That means my route passes by the United States, specifically Florida Keys. And then suppose my engine breaks down, or I get a hole in my boat, or something else happens. I approach the shore, drop anchor, and start making repairs. I don't know what will happen. On the American shore, yeah, so I'm approaching and even going ashore, I have no idea what's going to happen. But I can guess that the Coast Guard might show up, or some other service like immigration. They'll check things out, and they probably have some regulations that'll let you fix your boat so you can move on. Uh-huh. And you mentioned they don't stamp anything when you enter, right? They don't stamp when you leave either, do they? Or like when it's the United States. It's really a unique country in this respect. I mean, it's the only one I know anything about that does this. When you're leaving the United States on a yacht, you don't need to register or get your passport stamped. You don't need to. That's especially unusual. So you arrive, they stamp your passport. Yeah, you get on your boat. And then you leave and go to Cuba or I don't know, the Bahamas or South America, and you still have the same stamp. It's like you never left, you know? If you leave US territory and enter any other country, you have to go through immigration when you return to the United States. Uh-huh. So how does the immigration process work? Do you look for someone or do they find you? Like when you're anchored somewhere. I've done it many times, and here's how it usually goes. Let's take St. Martin, for example, or the U.S. Virgin Islands. You sail into the bay, drop anchor, and go ashore. On the dinghy, you head to shore and moor not far from the small port building. Then you go to immigration and say, I arrived on that boat. I want to go through immigration. That's how I went through immigration twice on St. Thomas. Once I even went through a more complicated process. So I came in with an American visa, right? We mean that you're official. I have an American visa, a multi-entry visa. That's correct. I have grounds for staying legally in the States. And so they put a stamp in my passport. I said, be a pal, give me an exit stamp for St. Thomas right away. He asks, well, when are you planning to leave? I say, in the morning. He says, well, come in the morning and I'll stamp it for you. I say, no, if I need to come a second time, then I'll just leave right now. He grimaced a bit, but still stamped my exit for me. I said, you don't need to put a stamp on the exit. Or maybe the rules are different on St. Thomas. So I said that I was going to the Dominican Republic. And they put the stamp for me. Yes, it wasn't necessary, but they did it anyway. So you asked them yourself to provide an exit strategy. Yes, yes, I really insisted. And they provided it for me. Absolutely correct. Listen, I've got some interesting questions here. Have you heard anything about fix and flip? That's when people buy an old house, renovate it, and sell it for a higher price. Now, have you heard anything similar about yachts? Like buying a yacht at a big discount from someone. It's just that when you do this with a house, there are people willing to finance you because they see that you bought it much cheaper than market value from people who needed cash quickly, and they participate in this flip that is in the renovation. Then you sell it and make a good profit. Is there some kind of similar earning plan? I'm personally interested in this, particularly regarding yachts. So a person buys a yacht cheaply, fixes it up, and sells it. Because I know that you fully serviced the yacht yourself, doing all the repairs, you did everything on your own. So if you bought your privilege there for, let's say, $90,000 and brought it up to par, you could probably sell it now for, I don't know, how many thousands? Well, give me a rough estimate at least. Georgie, I understand the question. Here's the answer. I haven't heard anything, you know, because the next video I'm preparing right now is exactly about this. And I actually accomplished this task using the example of the second catamaran. The philosophy was this: is it possible to buy a boat cheaply, restore it, sell it, and make a profit? Here's a spoiler, so the suspense is gone. But I'll tell you, I bought a catamaran for $50,000, invested $25,000, sold it for $100,000, made $25,000, and I feel great about it. And yes, depending on what kind of boat you get and how much you want to invest, this business is quite viable. And the second boat, the third boat, sorry, and the third boat, which I'm currently on, I also acquired using this principle. As of today, I've invested $100,000 in it. I bought it for $80,000, put in $20,000. And right now, I could sell it for about $120,000 to $130,000. If I invest another $10,000 to $20,000, the price could get close to $150,000. So you could say that you can make about 20 to 40%, depending on the situation where you're doing the repairs, what you're repairing. You can earn that kind of return on restoration. Let me give you one more piece of information. My friends, well, not exactly friends, but an acquaintance of mine was transporting a boat. The boat was a 52-footer. Caught in a hurricane. She was about 18 and ended up in Irma, I think. And it was destroyed. So he bought it. Did it capsize? What? Did it turn over? I'm not sure. I know they bought this boat for just over 200,000. It was pretty beat up, as such a boat would have cost about $1 million at the time. They put in 200, 220, maybe 250. So it ended up costing almost $500,000. Right now, you could easily sell a boat like this for 700, 800,000. Look, cars have VINs, right? In America, you can see everything that happened to a car by its VIN. If it flipped, sank, burned, or crashed. Boats don't have such numbers or databases like cars do, unfortunately. You need to gather info differently, which is why surveys are popular. People get the boat surveyed before buying. And the cost depends on the boat's price. And the survey costs about $3,000. Well, if you're buying a $20,000 boat, it's probably easier to ask you to look at it, even though you're not an official surveyor. That's just my logical thinking. The cost, that's correct. Okay, listen, what about insurance? Do you buy boat insurance or not? Is it necessary in America? I know Americans love to insure everything. There are two types of boat insurance. One is full coverage for all damages. The other is liability insurance for third-party damage. They differ greatly in price. The liability insurance is cheaper and worth getting. You'll be covered for any claims if something happens. But insuring your specific boat is debatable. It's a question of worth and feasibility. Full coverage is typically only for new boats. With rare exceptions, after deep refits on an old boat, you can get such insurance. Again, what? It's not that simple. It won't help here. Here, you need a refit first. That means a deep restoration of the boat. Then a survey, and only then might they offer you such insurance. I stopped insuring the boat after the first privilege. Well, the first was expensive, nearly $500,000 after all my investments. Due to inexperience, I insured for a couple of years at first. The insurance cost me around 4,000 euros. What kind of insurance do you mean? Full coverage. Full coverage plus liability for third parties. If you get full coverage, it covers everything, including third parties. Though you need to check insurance packages in each company. Do you use American insurance companies or others? I insured with a Spanish company. Twice. It works here in America and worldwide, of course. I don't know. The first 2 years, I was heavily into the insurance business. Then I sold that privilege when COVID started, and those old boats I bought, Katana and the last privileges, I no longer insured it. Can you tell us how you bought this privilege in St. Thomas, that is, to deregister it, put this registration there, or how it happened in a nutshell? Yes, I can tell you. In this particular case, I bought the boat through a broker. That is, through the Yacht World website, so he handled all the issues. And this is about the purchase of the boat. As for registration, that's not part of the broker's job. But I know that. But my specific broker, Liz, she had an acquaintance, consulted her, and this acquaintance worked right in the registration office on St. Thomas. She called and said, "You can register if you come there in person." She helped me fill out the registration paperwork, and I went, and for $135, I registered not one but two vessels. The dinghy is privileged too. I also registered the dinghy, and I have a certificate for it. That's how it's supposed to be in America. You need a passport for it, just like for a regular boat. How long is the registration valid? In this case, it was an annual registration. I'm currently working on renewing it, and I'm in Florida. Yes, while in Florida, I'm handling this. The latest info is forms arrive on May 27th, and then I'll renew my registration. Once done, I'll make a video about it. Is online registration not available here? That's exactly what I'm talking about. Online re-registration. First-time registration on Centamus can't be done online. You have to go there in person. Those are their rules. That's why registering in the U.S. Virgin Islands is tricky, but once there, it's easy and cheap. If you're already on Synthos, but only those with, say you bought a boat in Martinique and want to flag it American in Synthos. You can fly there. Registration on the English island is expensive, right? What's that? Registering on the British Virgin Islands seems quite expensive. I have no idea. Uh-huh. Yes, for American ones, there are two registrations, see? They cost $135. Great, that's very cheap. If you don't have a US visa, you can't technically visit the island to apply in person. That's the main issue. But if you have a legal reason to fly to St. Thomas, there's no problem at all. Feel free to use this option. Uh-huh. All right. Well, I think I've asked all the main questions I had for now. At the end of our chat, what would you say about Cuba as an island of freedom and other such islands? Do you agree with me? I'll say even more. My response to this topic will be a bit metaphorical and lengthy. There are paradise-like places on earth, and these paradise places aren't small. That's not it. It's not just some small paradise spot, you know. For me, paradise is where everything's just right. When we say just right, it means earth, water, and wind equally affect you. There are three big places on earth you could call paradise. The Caribbean, Mediterranean, and Southeast Asia. A person living on a boat is living in paradise. There's just enough pleasure, just enough challenges, enough thrills, adventures, and even losses. On a boat, you find everything you need for happiness. That's paradise. A boat symbolizes land on water and you control the wind. You're at the intersection of these three elements. It's an incredible state, truly incredible. It's unique and incomparable. If your heart has even a spark of this love, you must let it grow into a roaring fire. If you're lucky to have this love within you, nurturing it will lead to incredible self realization. It's simply unmatched. It offers a fantastic arena for both heroism and freedom, for solitude and personal growth. When I say growth, I don't just mean financially, though you can make money with a boat. You can ferry people, restore boats, do surveys or repairs. A skilled electrician can easily charge $100 an hour. There's always electrical work to be done on a boat, always without fail, no matter which boat you have. If it doesn't have electrical issues today, it surely will tomorrow. So, friends, yes, friends, if you want to experience paradise, don't think you can just charter a boat for a week and succeed. No, you won't truly understand it that way. You need to commit to at least 3 months, at the very least. Take the leap, rent a boat, or join someone and live on it for a minimum of 3 months. It's about immersing yourself in the feeling, letting the sea rock you like a mother. As you drift off, the stars rain down into your dreams. This pleasure is unrivaled, incomparable to anything else, something you can't find anywhere else. Sure, a climber might feel similar euphoric thrills, but the experience is fundamentally different. But if it's the allure of wind, sun, water, and sailing that makes your heart flutter, then you must try it and see. A whole new world will open up to you. Okay, on that optimistic note, I want to express my deepest gratitude to you once more. I hope to see you again soon. There. And we're planning for the month of July. I'm trying to gather people, folks are quite inert. Let's say I'm going rafting for a few days in late May with the kids in Colorado. Then come July, I'd love to dash over to you. Not sure about dates yet, but I'd be thrilled to visit you with my two kids, 15 and 10 years old. I want to find more people. Yeah, so it's not set in stone, but I'm thinking about it. Agreed. All right, let them mull it over. Hope to see you on board soon.